Hi, welcome to the training webinar this week as we continue through our best practices series, which I've called Advanced Design Concepts. Maybe I should have renamed it to Best Practices, but in any event, we're going to pick up where we left off last week. Except we're going to do something first. As you know, we have a lot of different icons in the product. So yesterday, and my screen is apparently the wrong size. So let me resize my window there so we can all see it. As you know, we have a lot of icons in the system. And we have two types of icons. We have the glyph icon series, and we also have the Font Awesome icons. So they're all basically font-based icons. And we're about to add a third group of icons, the Material UI icons, I think. At least that's the direction we appear to be heading in. So that's going to be a lot of icons. So in the documentation, I've had to add something. So if we go to the Implementer's Reference Guide and we go to Process Director User Interface, there is a topic there called Icon Chooser. Now I have added this sentence to this topic, which has a link to a brand new icon guide that I built off of a guide that one of our engineers provided me. And so here is the icons reference guide. And I am going to go ahead and copy this URL, and I'm going to paste it into chat. So I need to set this for everyone, and I am going to paste. This is the direct URL to the icon guide that I posted yesterday. So as you can see, it has all of the icons. It's pretty readable. I think I've made the icons large enough. These are the glyph icons. And so basically these are the icons that correspond to when you're in Process Director and you're picking an icon. So let me get out of this, which I had already had set up for us, but let's just go back to the form and we'll click on this icon here so we can open up the icon chooser. So the built-in icons that we see on this tab are basically the icons that I have listed here in this icon reference guide. Now there are two types of icons, as I said. There are glyph icons currently, and there are also the Font Awesome icons. So you can click the button to switch between the two icons. In the icon chooser, the Font Awesome icons, where'd my icon chooser go? There it is. The Font Awesome icons are under the tab called More Built-in Icons. And we provided this guide so that you could use these icons any place you needed to use them. So in the icon guide, for each of the icon, we provide the icon number. Now this is a little tricky. The icon numbers are actually the last 3 digits. The very first digit of this 4-digit number is the type of icon it is. So the Font Awesome icons, it's a 4-digit number. It always starts with 2. The glyph icons always start with 1. And presumably when we add the material icons, if indeed we decide to do so, that will be probably start numbering with a 3. But the icon numbers are these 3-digit numbers here. Now you can use the icons in different ways. So first of all, there's this CSS class. So you can actually show an icon simply by using CSS. Here is the CSS that you have to use. So it's GB object icon, glyph icons, and then the actual glyph itself, which is BP glyph dash and then the number. So for icon 1002, that is actually icon number 2 in the glyph icons. And so its CSS class would be BP glyph 2, with the 2, of course, replacing the N that we see at the top there with my guide. Font Awesome icons, different classes. GB object icon, FA for Font Awesome, and then it's BPFAI dash whatever the number is. So like in this case, for Icon 2001, it's BPFAI1. You can also use Unicode because they all have Unicode character symbols. So if you want to use Unicode, knock yourself out. That's available to you as well because they all have Unicode character representations. So it's E and the number, /E and the number for the Unicode for glyph icons, and it's F or /F and the number as the Unicode symbol for the font Awesome icons. And I've also added an SDK code sample. Most of you don't have the SDK, so you wouldn't ever call this, but we do have a get icon HTML in the SDK now. It is not documented yet. I have a Jira ticket in for the engineering team to tell me exactly what all of the declarations might be, whether it's overloaded with other declarations or whatever. So this is going to be added to the documentation. It's just not there yet, but you can, if you have the SDK, just pull an icon by using the get icon HTML command, and it'll just run that subroutine and grab the icons. So just to show you, we've got all these icons. They're all here. There's a guide that tells you what every icon is. Oh, and by the way, it's searchable. Now, I'm not super happy with the search, but there's only so much you can do with plain HTML and JavaScript. But it searches for the actual icon number. It will also search for the class name, but since they're all BP glyph something, that's not super helpful. So basically, if you're going to search by the icon number, you want to search just by the last 3 numbers of the icon. However, I'm assuming that you're using this page because you don't actually know what the icon number is. And so you're using this to find the icon number. So this guide is there. It exists. It has all of the icons, and it will be updated in the fullness of time with the additional icons whenever we add new ones. But for right now, this icon reference guide is available in the documentation for you. So feel free to use that. I think it's a better way of doing the icons. What I really wanted to do was to name these, but they don't actually have names. So there's no like keywords or anything else associated with them. It would be nice to have those and to be able to search by those keywords, but unfortunately there aren't any. So we're doing the best I can just to give you a list of all of the icons that are available in the product. Great. So with that out of the way, let's go back and pick up exactly where we left off last week. And we left off last week by dropping a drop-down onto the form. Before we talk about the drop-down itself, which is where we ended last week, let's talk about the type of control this is. This is a type of control called a list control. There are a couple of different list controls, and they all pretty much work and look the same. So we have the drop-down, and that is a drop-down menu, basically, from which you can select one and only one selection. Then we have the list control. So right here, list box is the control. So we can drop a list box in there. And I just want you to notice that these controls have very similar properties. In fact, this is not, we've actually added some stuff to the list box control, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But I'm going to need to go to a different server to show you a newer version of Process Director where we've got this. And then we have, under Input Controls, the radio button list. And let's talk about the radio button list for a second. Up here in the sort of the first 8 controls on the toolbar, which are the most common controls, we actually have the radio button control. Not a big fan of this control. It is harder to configure. It takes a lot more time to configure, and it's largely deprecated. In fact, I have a Jira engineering ticket in to replace the radio button with the radio button list. The radio button list is a newer control. It is much easier to configure. In fact, the configuration is very, very similar to both the list box and the drop-down control. All of these are list controls. So with the list box, it shows me basically a box that contains several selections. But the nice thing about the list box is I can select multiple selections out of the list box. And if you do select multiple selections, and you can configure it to do so, then the selected value of the list box, or the value of the list box, will be a comma-separated list of the values you select. Much like the drop-down control, the radio button list control is a list of mutually exclusive options. The radio button list and the drop-down control basically do the same thing, which is provide you with a list. The UI is just different, from which you can select one and only one item. So depending on how you want your UI to look, the choice of a radio button or a drop-down control is largely a stylistic choice. They both work in exactly the same way, although there's obviously no type ahead for a list box. Now, where you would use a drop-down, of course, would be if you had more than, say, 4 or 5 items from which a user could choose. If you use a drop-down list control and you have like 10 items in it, that gets to be a pretty large control, takes up a lot of space on the page, and tends to be unwieldy. So your choice between whether you should use a list box or a radio button control are, again, largely stylistic and aesthetic ones. If I have a lot of options, I'm probably going to want to use a drop-down because it's going to take up so much less space on the page, even though I do have to click on it, drop down the menu, and I have to find the item I want and click on it again. Whereas in a radio button list, I get to see all of the options. They're always on the page, and all I have to do is click once. So the radio button list is easier for your users to use unless you have more than 3 or 4 items, in which case you really want to go with the request type, the drop-down control to provide those selections. If you want people to be able to select more than one selection in a list, then your best choice in terms of the UI control that you use would be the list box control, because the list box control is the only list control that enables you to select multiple items from a list. Now, with the list box control, much like the radio button list, it's going to take up a certain amount of space on the page. How big you want to make this control is entirely up to you, because the radio button or the list box control has both a height and a width measurement where you can set this. Generally, it's best to set this in pixels. So if you wanted a larger height, you could just set it to 350 px. And so it would just be 350 pixels tall. Depending on how many items are in the list, there is a slider or a scroll bar on the right side that will enable the user to scroll up and down in the list. So you have to sort of make the decision on height as to how big is my list and how much do I want my user to have to scroll through the list when they use it. But if you want to provide a list where users can pick multiple items in the list, the list box control should be your preferred UI type. Now, we have added something for Process Director 6.1.400, and I'm going to go ahead and delete these controls off of this form because this is the control that we're going to add. Let's open up the documentation server, and hold on, I've got to be able to get to it. So there we go. We'll open the documentation server, and we'll resize my screen again. And I want to show you what we've added to the list box. So let's just open the content list, and let's just find some form definition that we can just open. Miscellaneous, that seems like a good one. So here we go. Here's a test form. that I didn't put on this server. Someone else did. So I'm sure they won't mind me messing with their form. On the uh, list box. So let me pick it here on the list box. Um, we've got some additional properties here. We can support filtering elements. That's the one I was looking at. That's the new property. Support filtering elements. So when you have support filtering elements checked, and this should work if I open up the form, I should be able to filter the list in the list box, much in the same way that I do with the type ahead dropdown. It should present me with sort of the same interface on the list box. At least it did the last time I looked at it last week. There we go. There it is. We have a little search box there. I don't have any items in this list box, so I can't actually show you anything. So maybe I should drop some items. Now, I'm about to do something that you should never do. I'm just putting stuff at random. Um, I'm just thinking of words. Um, great. So now I have some items in my list box. So what I just did, we'll talk about what I just did is something I never want you to do. So I recommend that you never do this, but it is great for testing purposes because it allows me to fill in some items in my list really quick. And so I can rerun my form. And so with the list box, I have all of these items and well, let me do one other thing because this is the default size of the list box and it's too small. So I'm just going to set this to 350 and we're going to run it again. And that should give me a little taller list box. There we go. Now it's big enough so we can see everything. It's actually too big, but oh well, too bad. So with this filter enabled, if I type in thing, it actually filters my list down to 3 items. But if I type in BR, it filters it down to 1 item, bread. CH gives me chicken. And if I erase it, it gives me my whole list. So it works very similar to the type ahead on a dropdown. Like I said, this will be available in the next version of Process Director, and it's certainly something I'll talk about it at the next feature spotlight webinar because I think it's a pretty cool addition to the list. Fine, so now let's go back to our form and take a look at our dropdown, which we're using here. With the dropdown, we have different ways to get items into a dropdown. And now I'm talking about a dropdown, but what I'm about to talk about for the dropdown would be equally applicable to the list box or to the radio button list. Because these are lists, there has to be a list of items. Now, right just a minute ago, I did the list box and I just went into the items property and I created a list simply by typing in items, 1 item per line. You hit enter, go to the next line and add a new item. And you can build out a list by doing this manually. This is a bad practice, however, and is not one that we recommend. We really only recommend that you fill a list control in one of 2 ways. First, you have the drop-down object control to fill a list. So I'm going to create that drop-down object control. We've got business rules. Usually, if you have a drop-down objects are reusable. And because they're reusable, that's pretty cool. I should probably put them in the root level of my Process Director installation so that all of my drop-down objects are in the same place. In fact, I already have a drop-down called ADC drop-down there. It already contains the items that I want. And the nice thing about having my drop-down objects in one place, drop-down objects are reusable everywhere in Process Director. And so if I have a list of items that I use often, then the best thing to do would be to create a drop-down object. And that way, all I have to do is connect it to my control. Now, I don't like the fact that, let's just go with HCPS as my value. Now, for a drop-down object, and while we're here, we might as well briefly cover how to create them. Most of the time, you'll work here. If you want to add a new drop-down entry, you can just add it. It'll add a new line, and you can provide its display text, which will be what the user sees, and the value, which will be what is saved with the control. Now, every drop-down has two tabs for filling it out. So as you see at the very top, there's a checkbox, add a null or blank entry. So I always put in, select one as my null or blank entry. And I can also do it on the text box view. This works exactly like the items property does for any of the list controls. So you can create an item with this syntax, display text : value, and it will just create both the display text that the end user sees and the value that I want to see. Now, this is a drop-down control for an actual drop-down control. So therefore, I have this null or blank entry that is added at the top. And that's fine for a drop-down control. However, if you're using either a radio button list or a list box, you would not want that null or blank entry at the top of the drop-down. You could just ignore that. You could turn that off. All you really care about are the items in the list. So with a drop-down object, I can fill drop-downs, list boxes, and radio button lists with the item that I want, and I can just do that right on the form. So let me turn off this system folders, because I have a lot of system folders and they take up a lot of space. We'll go back to our form, and on our radio button list, or it's not a radio button list, it's a drop-down. I am thinking that because I only have 4 items here, that maybe this should be a radio button list. As I said previously, if you only have a couple of items, maybe a radio button list is your best selection, your best choice of a UI control, because it will make things a little easier for your user because they only have to click once to make a selection, whereas you have to make 2 clicks in a drop-down control. But we're going to go ahead and just leave the drop-down control here. We'll just live with it. But what I'm going to do, instead of filling out this items, I'm just going to go to the field properties. And because it is a list control, all the list controls have a link to drop-down object property. So all I have to do is just select that, navigate up to drop-down objects, and there is my ADC drop-down for Advanced Design Concepts. And now this drop-down control will, at runtime, automatically fill itself with the blank item, the select one, and then the 4 selections that I want to make for my request type. So it just automatically fills the drop-down, and it provides the select one as the blank entry, which means that if I make this a required field, that the user has to fill this out or the form won't submit. That's the important thing about the select one on a dropdown. I have seen sometimes people don't have select one as their dropdown. If so, then what happens is that makes your very first item the default selection in the dropdown. If you do that, making this field a required field doesn't actually do anything because the first item is a value. HR action has a value, H, that gets saved with the control. If I make this a a required control, then it will always validate and it will always have a value. And therefore, no matter what the user puts into it, the form will accept it. So the reason why we put this blank item on dropdowns is to give us the ability to make it a required item, because the select one has no value. That means that my field is blank. And if I keep select one as the value and I don't select one of the other 4 available options, then this will not validate if I try to submit the form. The value will be empty. It will not, it is a required field, and it will show me the appropriate error messages. So that very first item, that select one, is important, especially if you are going to make a field required. By the way, while we're on the subject, let's talk about this control here and form field validation. Okay, so this is my checkbox control. I'm just going to call it checkbox because I'm going to delete it in a minute. So I've got a checkbox control. So while we're on the topic of validation, you can make a checkbox control required all you want, and it's meaningless. Checkboxes always have a value. They are either checked or they are unchecked. So if a checkbox is checked or unchecked, that's a valid value. And you can't make a checkbox a required field. And I mean, you can, but you can't do it as a required field. You would actually have to make the checkbox, if you wanted to force people to check it. Although if you wanted to force people to check it, why would you have a checkbox? The very existence of a checkbox implies options. So just know that checkboxes always have a value. They're either checked or unchecked, and therefore if you try to make them a required field, they'll still work no matter what their state is, because they are, they always have a value. So just something else to keep in mind whenever you're designing forms. You have to think about how the controls actually work, and what data they store and how they store data, and what data means for that control. The checkbox is kind of a weird little control in that it always has a value, which also brings us back to the radio button list. Now, the nice thing about the radio button list is that if you don't select one of the items in the list, it doesn't yet have a value. So you don't need that select one for a radio button list, because by default, the radio button list is just null and it has no value. So you can easily make a radio button list required or not required, and it doesn't really matter. You don't have to create, like you do for the drop-down control. You don't have to create a blank item. Blank is just its default state when it first opens up. So just some various things about how list controls actually work. The radio button control, that's always a tricky one. This was the initial radio button list control that we had. And if you have like 3 options for a radio button list, you literally have to make 3 radio buttons, 1 for each of your option. It is super tedious to create, because now I have to configure each of these buttons. Now, if I want to make a mutually exclusive list of radio buttons, then they all have to have the same name. So this is the one exception where the name property of a control is replicable, because it's not really the name. The name of the control is actually its ID, and that does have to be unique. So we can call this one R1, and this one, we'll just get rid of the 17, so it says radio, and we'll call this R2. And for the third one, again, we have to call it radio, because I'm making a group of radio buttons, and we'll call this one R3. So I've got to separately, for each of these radio button controls, I have to separately set what the text and what the value is for this control. You can show the radio buttons as blocks, which is a visual indicator, which turns the entire radio control into a full block rather than just the button itself. But with this configuration, when I run it, I'm going to have a lot of controls to delete before we get done with this today. When this control or when this form runs, I now have 3 mutually exclusive radio buttons. They all say text, but I can select just one. And because they are all in a group named radio, they become mutually exclusive. It is a huge pain to use radio button controls. And so that's why the radio button list control exists, because it is less of a huge pain to configure. And it is a single list control, and it works like all of the other list controls. So it's just a more convenient control to use rather than the radio button control. So like I said, I've put in a support ticket for engineering, a JIRA ticket for the engineering team to replace this with the radio button list, because the radio button list is the preferred solution. Much easier to configure. You can attach a radio button list to a drop-down object. It just makes your configuration simpler. So in concept, let's explain what I'm doing with this request type drop-down for this form. So this week and for the next week or two, however long it takes, we are going to be building a application that will handle multiple types of requests. And the reason that I'm doing that is because I probably don't want to create 4 different applications that do basically the same thing and that go through the same sort of approval process. So in this case, if I'm requesting a leave or I am making a complaint or a suggestion or what have you, all of this stuff is going to go through my chain of command. And it's ultimately, most of them are going to end up at HR for some sort of action, right? So if you object to something that some rating someone gave you in your annual review, or you have some other complaint that you want to make, maybe somebody is bothering you at the office and you want them to stop, or you just want to request leave, you're pretty much going to go through the same process, right? It's going to go to your supervisor. Depending on the type of request, they may look into it. We may just want to inform them and send it up to your department manager. And then it, at the end of the day, is going to go to HR, either for some specific action that HR needs to take, or simply to report it to HR. But I've got these 4 different types of requests, all of which will have basically the same process for approval. So I have the choice of either making 4 different applications, which seems to me to be excessively tedious, or I can make a single application that can handle multiple request types. And so that's what we're going to build. So it will enable me both to show you how to make a simple application that handles multiple request types, but also to illustrate some of the other best practices that we want to illustrate for this series of webinars. So that's what my request types do. So I am going to want to require, in fact, I need to require this field. So we are going to set this field as required. Be sure that you're very careful about determining what fields need to be set as required or not. This is the most important field in this form because I'm going to need to use it to determine how my process is going to work. So based on the request type, I may skip a step here or there, or based on the request type, the results that each of my, well, it may be approvers, it may be reviewers. They're going to have different results. If I'm just reviewing it, I don't want to have an approve, I want to have a review result. So based on the request type, I'm going to have to change my results. In one case, based on the request type, I'm going to skip one of my activities entirely because I'm going to skip my immediate supervisor and go straight to my department head. So because the process is so highly dependent on the request type, I need to make this a required field. I don't want anybody to be able to submit my form without telling me what the request type is. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to have a text box here. And we need to talk about text boxes a little bit as well. So I have this text box. It's input 16 now. I am just going to call this, I forget what I think I called it narrative. So we're going to call this the narrative. This is for the user to explain what it is that they want to do here. I want to give them some space to do this. So I'm going to make this a little bigger. I'm going to give it a width of about 40 columns. And I am going to make this, let's give them 5 rows. So we're going to make this a much larger text box so that they can type in some extra text in here. And in fact, what I may want them to do is to be able to format that text a little bit. So I have a couple of properties up here. We recommend that you don't use rich text edit. That is an old, ugly, rich text editor. It was the initial rich text editor that we had in the product. Probably shouldn't use it. It's ugly, so you really wouldn't want to use it. But it does remain for backwards compatibility because for many years, this was the only rich text editor that we had. Once we created the online form designer, which was back in 2019, 2020 or thereabouts, we also used the same CK editor for a text editor. So basically, you'll give your users a similar, although much smaller and much more compact list of formatting options that they can use on their control. So we do recommend that if you are going to make something editable in the sense that you want people to be able to format the text, boldface, underline, whatever it may be, that you use the text editor. The allow spell check thing, that has largely been superseded. The commonality of spell checks built into modern browsers makes it largely unnecessary to have an extra spell check tool inside the text editor. So in general, you can pretty much ignore this. If you use the rich text editor, it automatically checks it. What that does is it allows the spell check from your browser to work. Back in oldie days, there was actually a special spell check editor for the rich text editor. So that's sort of gone. So if we use the text editor, it just turns the spell check on sort of automatically. So you don't really have to worry about the spell check too much. But what this allows you to do is to create a form that enables people to type in their text and then do the formatting. The downside of using the text editor, and so you got to think carefully about what you're going to do with the information that the users are going to put in here. The thing that you have to worry about is that while it allows the user to give you this nicely formatted text, as I would love to demonstrate for you if the form would ever display, it does have a drawback, which is that it no longer stores the value that you put in this field in plain text. So when this thing pops in, and it is not popping in, and I am not sure why it is not popping in. It's visible. It's there. I've got use text editor turned on. Ah, the joys of live TV. we may swap over to the other server real quick just to display. Well, it shows up and then it disappears. Uh, don't know what's happening. I do know that I was playing around on my vars file. So maybe that messes it up. Let's turn the text editor off and let's show my form. I also think I may have some custom formatting on the. I'd have to open my vars file. I'm not going to put you through all of that. Um, so yeah, this shows up fine. Everything is fine there, but it's not showing me the. It's not showing me the controls. It could be because I have messed up something in my vars file, which is fine. The point is that if the text editor does show up, which I don't understand why it's not, but if you have the use text editor turned on, the thing you have to remember is that the value placed in here is not going to be a plain text field anymore. Yeah, it's not going to show it to me. I need to go back in and figure out what I did in my vars file, and we're not going to take the time to do that. If you have the rich text editor turned on for like the fifth time I've tried to get this concept out of my mouth, it's not going to store plain text. Normally, on an input box, it only stores plain text and it stores the field as plain text. If you turn the text editor on, and by the way, if you use Rich Text Edit, which now I wonder if Rich Text Edit will turn on. Either way, the same result happens. The value in this field gets stored as HTML. Okay, well, that works. So I can do all the stuff that I want to do, even though it looks a lot uglier here with the rich text editor. Um, I can do all of this and it's fine. But in order to store that formatting, it stores it as HTML and it stores it as raw HTML. So that means it's going to have, if I hit enter, it's going to have a P character, and that's going to have an EM character, and that's, or an EM tag, and that's going to have, I think U is still the underline character, or the underline tag in HTML. Strong is the tag for boldface in HTML. I'm not sure how it does this. It may be span style equals color semicolon red. There's a lot of extra text that goes into here, which means that when you show it or try to show it in like a knowledge view, the knowledge view is just going to deliver it as plain text, as literal text. So all of your HTML is going to show. It's not just going to show up as plain text. So you have to be a little careful about using the rich text or the text editor. First of all, don't try to customize your text editor and then do a live webinar. Second of all, remember, it's gonna be HTML if you do it this way. And so you're going to have to deal with parts of the UI are going to show that HTML as just literal HTML. So it's going to show you the literal HTML code. It's not going to show you the formatted result. So be careful about using the text editor or the rich text editor. Please use the text editor, not the rich text editor. Now, as I said, I think what I have done is something bad. So since this is a multi-week series, I don't feel the tyranny of time. So I feel a little more comfortable going in and experimenting with some things. So let's just open up the server. Let me find a form and let me go in and just draw. Oh, I've already got a text box in here because this was, I think I used this in the last feature spotlight webinar. Um, so we'll go here and once again, let's just make this 60 wide and let's make it 10 high and let's use the text editor and let me run it on this server and it's not showing up here either. and I'm not sure why. Oh, I am sure why. This entire section isn't showing up here. Let's go here. Um, so style options, the request information. I thought I had this. So what am I seeing on this one? Hold on, let me look at the form. Is that section 10 actually showing up on the form? I'm now kind of curious. No, it is not showing up on the form. Let me submit. And it's still not showing up on the form. So why is this whole section not appearing? Well, this section is showing up on the form. So let me do that, and let me copy and paste this up here. Let's rerun the form real fast. And it'll have to compile. There we go. That's what we're supposed to see for the text editor. As you can see, it is a much nicer text editor, although it basically has sort of the same basic formatting things that you would expect. And I can make that bold and highlighted and underlined and, well, I messed up, and orange, and I can make the background black. I can do all kind of cool stuff with that. But there's a button here called source. This is the actual value that is going to get stored for this control. Now, it's all cool and everything when you see it in the form, because in the form, it shows me with all of my formatting. But what is actually getting saved in the database, in the process director database, is this text here, which is all of your plain old HTML. And I was right, it does do span style as the HTML. So that takes up a lot of text. So when I show this in a knowledge view, this is what it's going to show me. If I pull it out in some sort of business value, this is the value that it's going to show me. So think real carefully before you use either the rich text editor or this control, the actual text editor. This is the one that we would recommend that you use. This gives you the nice modern UI. This is also customizable, although, as you can see on my other server, you can customize yourself into invisibility, which is apparently what I have done. So I'll need to go back and fix that to reanimate my, well, I closed the wrong one. No, I didn't. That's the right one. Wait a second. No, I did close the wrong one. Sigh. So let's go back to training and go back to where we were. Training webinar, advanced design concepts. And let's reopen our form. All right, so anyway, we've got a narrative here that my user can fill out. Now, depending on the type of request, I might need to do some other things. So what I'm going to do is I am going to row and delete rows. And so these are going to be the only two controls I have in this section. I am, however, going to want to add another section to my form. So I'm going to give myself a couple of blank rows here so I have some space to put in some sections. So we talk a lot about only showing your users what they need to see when they fill out their form. Now, last week we talked about it in terms of filling out the form initially. But this is also true if you're going to be doing a form that does different things. You should get into the practice of hiding fields that the user doesn't need. Now, in our case, I have 4 different types of requests. So based on the type of request, I'm going to want to see some different information for the end user. Now, we'll go in a little later and we'll talk about the different types of information, but I basically have 4 types of request here. I have a time off request. In fact, let's go back and look to be sure that I remember what 4 request types that I have built into this thing. So we're going to go back and look at our drop-down objects, and I am, in fact, going to save this so that I don't just go back and find that I have to redo everything that I just did this last second. You know what? It might be a lot easier if I just favorite all of these so that I can get to them easily from the home page. Okay, so let's go look at my drop-down object again, my ADC drop-down. I did not save it, so I'm going to go ahead and refix this. So I want HCPS. I'm just going to go ahead and update. Okay, so I've got HR action, complaint, time off, and suggestion. And so I want to handle each of these slightly differently. So if I put in an HR action, obviously this is something that HR has to do. So what I'm going to want to do is, let's say that my address has changed or I've gotten a new phone number. So I'm just going to need to have HR update my records. Now, in this particular case, my process is going to work a little differently. My supervisor and department head are going to review it, but I mean, they can't deny that I've changed my phone number. What I really want is for this to go to HR so that they can fix it. So the supervisor and department head notification will basically be pro forma. They just need to be notified that I have a new phone number so that if they have to update anything, locally, they can do that. But ultimately, it's HR that's going to be doing that action. If I have a complaint, all right, there may be different types of complaints. We're going to treat them as if they were all the same, however, but that's going to be a little bit different. If I have a complaint, it's most likely going to be about my supervisor, so I'm probably going to skip my supervisor and go straight to the department head. Time off, well, obviously that's going to have to be approved all the way up the chain, and then HR is going to have to be able to sign off on it. And then if I have a suggestion, we'll handle that differently too. So this is obviously going to change my process, but it's also going to change my form. If I'm asking for an HR action, I'm going to need some different information to pass along in the process than I would if I was just asking for time off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create different sections of the form to handle different types of requests that I might put in this HR request application that we're kind of building here. So what we want to be able to do is ensure that users only see the stuff that they see when they need to see it. Not entirely sure what all fields are. Well, I am sure what type of fields I'm going to put in for some of this, but I'm going to need some extra section controls that I'm going to need to show and hide based on whatever I select as the request type. Since the request type is going to determine what I see on my form, I am going to have to make the request type field an event field. Because when I change the value of the request type field, I'm going to need to see different, the appropriate data entry for that type of request. Now I can do this in one of 2 ways. I can either use an embedded section control or I can use a formal section control. There's no right or wrong way to do this, although from a design view, If I was using a table like this, and I wanted to use the embedded section control, then what I would most likely do is I would go down here and I would add an embedded section control. So let's go to layout and let's look at embedded section. And I'm just going to hit enter and put in an embedded section end. And then down here, I'm actually going to drop in a section control. So the only difference between a section and an embedded section control, they're both section controls. They are both containers for other controls, which makes them parent containers for one or more controls. So I can show them or hide them, and it shows and hides all of their constituent or child controls. I can enable them or disable them, and they will enable or disable all of their constituent controls automatically. So the nice thing about sections is I can control the visibility or the enabling of a specific section on the form, and that automatically enables or hides or shows or disables all of the controls contained in that section. The only difference really between a section control and an embedded section control is that the section control has a visual representation on the page. It has a header. The header has text. Like up here at the top, it says request information. Down here at the bottom, we haven't put in any text yet, so it just defaults to text. So we'll call this time off information. I can use either two of these methods. I could also, if I wanted, I could embed a section in a section. So that works because, again, section controls are just section controls. With a regular section control, not only does it have a header, but it can also be expanded or collapsed. By default, section controls show up as expanded. They show you everything, but you don't have to expand them. You can have them default to not expanded, but there will always be the little button over here that whenever you click on the header of a section control, it expands it or collapses it. So you have that UI choice. So however you want to do this is fine, and it'll work fine either way. It's really entirely up to you, but it's important that you do use the section, especially in a case like this, where we are just going to show and hide different information based on the request type. And I can use both, in fact, if I want to, but I can also, just use one type. I think that's really up to you. I think with the embedded section control, they are best used in a circumstance. Well, I can explain it, although I don't think I can show it to you. Or maybe I can. So many, many years ago, I created a demo for a customer during the sales process, and that's over here. And I am just gonna log in as me, and let's open the content list, and there we go. That's the one I wanted. Wait, that's test. Hold on. That is not the one I created. Demo, Ogden Weber Technology College, but that's test form. There we go. I think this is the one that I want because I also created a custom icon for them at the time. Although that is their form or their timeline, not the form. So this is the application form that I created. And I think it shows a good example of when you might want to prefer to use an embedded section over a regular section. And I probably built this back in 2016, maybe. Oh no. It is a word form. That's how long I created this. So you know what? It's a 10-year-old demo. Who cares? I'm going to convert it. Um, I'm going to convert. Oh, who? Oh, maybe I did that. Okay. Um, I thought I used their logo, but that's okay. So there's a couple of things in this form where here we go. I decline to provide. So this is apparently in Utah, there's some state laws here. So if somebody who is not an employer apparently asks me for my social security number, I can tell them, no, I'm not going to give you my social security number. What do you think of that? And they can't do anything. There's another thing. If you're over 62 years old, there is this waiver where I can't get a degree, but I can go to any class that I want at any college and I can take the class. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't provide a degree unless I actually pay for the course, but I don't have to pay for the course. I can take it for free. I can audit any course and just take it if I am apparently 62 years of age or older. Now, the reason why I've got these embedded sections here is depending on which of these selections I make, if I make this selection like declining to provide my social security number, or I give them my date of birth, and it turns out that I'm older than 62 years of age, I want to show some extra information on the form. So this is a great use of, it sounds like I'm tooting my own horn because I'm the one that created this, but this is, I think, a good use of the embedded section control because it hides information unless I actually need to see it, which is sort of the key of using the section controls and especially the embedded section control, because the embedded section control is, of course, hidden. You don't see that control. It has no visual representation. So it makes it much more convenient for use in a scenario like this. So we'll let this form run. And I'm sure it will display in the fullness of time. Oh my goodness. That is a big, big form. I get so used to on my servers determining the size of what the form sizes when a form opens. It always catches me by surprise when they open full screen. Okay, so I'm going to need a couple of things here. My first name that I never use. Um, and I just need this because of the way the thing works in Utah. So I put in my name and I'm filling all of this other stuff out. And then I get here to social security number. And well, I'm not going to give you my social security number, which is fine. Oh, it's taking a long time. I hate it when it does this. It's supposed to just be snappy and just show up. But there we go. I, Dale Franks E. Okay, well, that's clearly wrong. Refuse to give my social security number. And of course, I have to check off that I'm going to refuse to give my social security number. And I've got to put in whatever the date is that I do it. Similarly, down here, when I get to my date of birth, I'm going to roll this thing back to, I guess we'll roll it back to, okay, well, 45 should go back far enough. So we'll say May 30th, 1945. And oh, there we go. Now it tells me because I'm 62 years or older, I have all of this stuff. And of course, I can now select that my acknowledgement that I'm just going to take this course, and I have to put in the date that I'm acknowledging it. And so this is great. And of course, if I am not that old, so let's wheel it back up to, okay, 1996. Well, I didn't select a date, D. So let's wheel it back up. Okay, 1984, 31st of May, 1984, and it just goes away. And of course, if I decide that I don't decline to give my social security number, I can just go ahead and give my social security number there. And so if I don't decline, I just never see those messages. And if I'm not 65 years old, I never see those messages. Yeah, I know it's required because I gave my social security number, but that is a good use of the embedded section control. For what we are doing in this particular case, I'm not sure whether it's better to use the embedded section or a formal section control. I can give arguments either way. The only problem with using the embedded section control is that you have to worry about spacing. So when you're going to use an embedded section control, you want to have as little spacing as possible. Because here's the thing, if I leave a blank line, like right there, then that blank line is going to show up on the form as well. And so when this control shows up, it's going to add an extra line in here. You know what? Maybe we'll just mix and match here. So when I have embedded section controls, and I'm going to use a bunch of them, and this does not matter with a section control. It only matters with the embedded section control. So give me where's my little red? I need an extra line. There it is. I need an extra line. So here, right, I can add as many section controls as I need. Now it's going to give me that extra line there, which I don't want. So I am going to want to delete that so that I can get my extra line. And sometimes this is really tricky to do in the UI. Sometimes if you like triple click and hit delete, it works. That doesn't want to work for me right now. So I'm going to go to source. I'm going to have to find that. Where is that? Right there. I'm going to have to get rid of that. There we go. That got rid of that extra line. But this is going to show up basically the way I expect when the form runs. It's going to show me all of these sections separately, and they're easy to split up, although, of course, getting rid of that extra line can sometimes be a bit of a pain. But for the most part, it's pretty easy to tell where you are with section controls because they are visually represented on the page. If you're going to use an embedded section control, and this is where it gets tricky, what you don't want to do is start putting in information here. Because if this section appears, what I'm going to have is a big blank line here and another big blank line here. Similarly, if I'm going to stack a bunch of embedded section controls together, then what I want to do is, if I'm going to put two embedded section controls together, then I'm going to want to have sort of my content here. I am going to want an extra line if I need it. And then if I want another section here, what I need to do with the embedded section control is put the embedded section right there. So my embedded section end and my embedded section start for the next section are just butted right up next to each other. And then I can come down here and drop in my embedded section end, and then I can throw in another embedded section. So it is a little confusing at first until you get used to putting in embedded sections. But what you want to do is get rid of any extra space between those sections if, as we're going to build it, I have these mutually exclusive sections. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and use the regular section controls. Well, maybe that's not the best way of doing it. You can do it either way, but since I've already got these embedded section controls on here, I'm just going to go ahead and use them. So I'm going to get rid of the section controls. And we'll just use the embedded section controls, and we'll just build off of this, although obviously I'm going to have to get rid of this. Now I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, this is 3, so I'm just going to go ahead and put an embedded section in there, and then this should be 4. If my counting is right, we'll have another embedded section, and we'll go down here and we'll put our embedded section end. Actually, I don't even think, well, we'll worry about spacing later. We'll just drop in an embedded section end right here. Now, I have these 4 sections, and they're going to store different types of information based on the request type, and they're going to show up at different times based on the request type. So I'm going to have to do some visibility and enabling scenarios on these controls. So we're going to select my first section control. If I can, since they're all, but it's better if you make these all one at a time rather than make them, wow, I just can't select that top control. There we go. Section 19. So we're going to call this section time. And then we'll go to my next control. And okay, you know what? I've showed you how to do it. We're just going to go back and do one section at a time. This will be easier. So let me select my section control. So this should be section time. So let me get rid of that extra R. And so this is going to be my time off information. And that it says section control. That's not a section control. Why is my UI getting all wonky? Let's go back here. Let's go back to form controls. Let's delete all controls marked for deletion and get rid of all those controls because I'm throwing stuff in and taking it off. And then we'll go back to design and we'll take another whack at this thing. There we go. So we're going to go ahead and add our new line there, and we're going to drop in with our embedded section. And there we go. That's what I'm looking for. And we'll call this section time. So this will be our time off section. It obviously is a start time and an end time, and a calculation for the number of hours that I'm taking off on leave. So I'm going to put those all in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop it into another table. So I'm just going to have one row with 3 columns, and it's going to insert this table. And what it's going to do is it's going to stick it on the line below the embedded section control. And it's only doing that for interest of space, but it knows that this is an embedded section control, and it's just going to give me the spacing that I need. And I can go right back over here and drop in my layout and embedded section end. And at runtime, this will all look fine. So I've named this section time, and I've made the request type. I think I've made the request type an event field. So let's go to its field properties. Now we will make it an event field. I need to save it. So we'll do a quick save of our form to be sure that that's an event field. And because it's an event field now, I can look at this field and decide what I want to show and hide in all of my sections based on the value of the request type. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the field properties for this control, and I'm going to go to the set display options. And you have two choices. Field is visible when, field is hidden when. Which one of these two that you choose, because we're going to set a condition, and if I set a condition, you can use either or, but we need to keep two things in mind. What you choose here is really largely up to you. But remember, these are the opposite. So field is visible when is going to require a condition that is the exact opposite of field is hidden when. I prefer, and this is up to you, this is not a formal recommendation, that's coming in a minute, but I prefer field is visible when. I prefer to specify when people get to see the field rather than trying to specify when the field is hidden. It tends to be easier to set up a use case and simpler to set up a condition of when a field is visible rather than when a field is hidden. It's not always true, but it's generally more straightforward, in my opinion, to use field is visible when I want to create conditional visibility. So I can determine the exact condition under which I want it visible, and then it will be hidden all other times. So in this case, we're going to go with field is visible when, and of course, it's going to want me to create a condition. Before I even create a condition, I'm going to click otherwise hidden. I want this field by default hidden. I only want it visible when a specific condition applies. So for all of these sections that I'm going to create on this form, boy, sometimes I just can't think of simple words. For all these sections that I'm going to create, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to set them to be all hidden, otherwise hidden, unless the particular condition is true. Now, it's going to be the same condition for all of them. I am going to evaluate the value of the request type field. So I have my request type, and in this case, I want the request type to equal T, because if I choose a time off, I think it's actually P if I choose a paid time off request for PTO. You know what? I want that to be different because in my mind, T is easier to remember. So we're going to have to do a little editing on my drop-down control. So if the value of request type is T, I want this embedded section visible. Otherwise, I want it hidden. Now, having said that, I should reopen my content list. I should definitely save my form. So let's give it a chance to do that. And then let's go back up here to my drop-down objects and open my ADC drop-down. Yes, time off. I want time off to be T, not PTO. So HCTS. So H for HR, C for complaint, T for time off, S for suggestion. Okay, that makes sense to me. So now we've saved that. And so now I know that if I pick time off, the value of my form control will be T, and I will show my fields. Now I'm going to want to show my start and end dates for my leave. So I'm just going to go ahead and we'll just add some things real quickly here. We'll add a label and call it label start. Label start. Oh, come on. Caps lock is on. Labels. Wow. Watching me type has to be either enraging or hilarious. This will be my start date, and I am gonna set the associated control ID to PTO start. And that means that I need to create a control, which in this case will be a date picker that I am going to have to call PTO start. And that'll be my date picker. And then I'll need to do something similar over here. We'll just call this label end, and text will be end date, and associated control ID will be PTO end, which I can now create, which will be another date time picker, or a date picker, which we will call PTO end. And over here, I need to do some calculating. So we'll get to that later. And it's taking me a long time to do some stuff. I may start copying and pasting controls over from one form to another. That might make things a little easier. Wow, the way that Zoom highlights your screen is kind of irksome because it hides the menu. Although I guess it's my fault because I'm only trying to show you the window. So let's go to the content list because I think this is going to be a little easier. In fact, it may be easier. Well, no, I'll have to build stuff maybe between webinars. Uh, that's the wrong partition, so it'd be a lot more helpful if I go back to this partition. Training webinar, advanced design concepts, and let's go to my completed sample application and my advanced form. So I can just grab, but by the way, I have uh, I have a completed version of this application. So if you want to see that, but as you can see on this version of the application, I actually dropped in different section controls. I didn't use the embedded sections. So I don't know, we may swap back and forth because it's already 11:22 and I'm spending a lot of time on configuration because I'm giving you way more background information than we are doing configuration. So total time off in days. Let me click that. That's time off days. So we'll just, well, I don't like time off days, but what this will enable us to do, I only put this in 3. What it really needs to be is 4. So let's go with column, and we'll insert another column there. So we're going to drop this field in here. This is our time off days. I'm going to rename it PTO days. And I'm also going to set the columns down to like 4. So it's a smaller field. I do need to give it a label. So let me go up here because there's no, I don't think on the other control I added a label. I think I just threw text on there. And maybe you'll have to forgive me because just doing label controls over and over is a little bit of a pain. So you know what? We're just going to go with copying and pasting this. The best practice, always use labels. Don't use text like I'm doing here, but just in the interest of time, we're going to copy and paste. And so I have this calculation control that I'm going to throw right here. And I keep hitting Alt Tab instead of Control Tab. And we'll just, what I should have done is just grab that whole thing, huh? But I didn't. So just let me copy and paste over here. And while we're here, we'll just make these bold as well so that it at least looks like it matches. So we're going to pretend that these are label controls simply in the interest of time. So a couple of things that I need to do here. First of all, I need to test to be sure this actually works, because the reason I dropped these controls in here is so that we could see something if I picked time off as my time. And so I'm going to need to do this for every section that I create on the form. I'm going to need to run the form, and I'm just going to hope that I don't see my start date, end date, and all the other fields whenever my form opens up. Great. Next, I need to test to see if I pick complaint. That's great. I don't expect to see anything. Suggestion, I don't want to see anything. HR action, don't want to see anything. Time off, I do want to see a thing, and that is the thing I want to see. So ultimately, what I want to have is a set of controls, and in this case, I'm using the embedded section controls that are going to show me different fields based on the request type that I select, so that at any given time, I don't see all the fields. I do see a lot of times people make forms, and when they create the form, they put in all of the fields that someone might fill out, and they try to give instructions on the form. Or if you're doing this thing, you have to fill these fields out. If you're going to do the other thing, well, you also got to fill these fields out. That makes the form more confusing for your end users to navigate through. It requires that they read much more carefully what is going on that form. And I think in many cases, it is sort of a mistake to expect your end users to read your forms that carefully. This is a better setup. Show your users the relevant fields when they need to see them. If I'm doing time off, these are the fields I need to see. If I am doing a complaint, I have another set of fields I need to see. What I don't need to see are any of the time off fields. They're just not relevant to what I am trying to do. Now, let's talk about doing some calculations and date calculations. Process Director has a calculation control. It's really simple and it's easy to use. However, it requires numeric values. And I need to calculate two things. I need to calculate the number of hours of vacation time I am taking between a given start date and a given end date. I can't just do that in a calculation control, at least not in one step anyway. So in order to derive the number of hours, what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to find the number of days that I have for my time off. Now, a couple of things I need to do. I only want to do the calculation because my calculations are going to be all wonky. If I have a start date and an end date. Now, the start date, and I can do this one of two ways, but for the start date and the end date, to make it simple, I'm just going to make the end date an event field. Now, I'm doing that because I know how I want this form to work. So I know I'm going to pick a start date before I pick an end date. In the real world, you don't know. Somebody might put the right start date in and the right end date in, or they might come back in and say, oh, I put in the wrong start date. And they might have to come back in and change their start date. So in the real world, I'd probably have to make the start date an event field as well. Again, whenever you are thinking about how a user is going to use your form and you're looking at these individual fields, you have to think to yourself, how is my user, what are the different ways that the end user can use this form field? We expect that, and this is often a failure of imagination for a designer, We know how we want the form to work, and we expect that people are going to use the form in a particular way because one of the things about being a sort any sort of developer or designer is that you kind of fool yourself into thinking that the way that you have envisioned it is the way that everybody else is going to see it. And that's not true. There is a theory of mind problem going on here. So I would think, well, I'm obviously going to put in my start date and then I'm going to put in my end date, and only the end date needs to be a event field because everybody's going to use it that way. Well, but people make mistakes. So I might put in the wrong start date and then put in the end date and then realize, oh, wait a second, that's the wrong number of days and the wrong number of hours. I've made a mistake. Did I make a mistake on my end date? Did I make a mistake on my start date? It could be either or, and you have to account for that. So in the real world, both of these fields are going to need to be event fields. So if I change either one of them, I am going to do my calculation. So it doesn't matter which one I change, I'm still going to do my calculation. Now, the calculation may be right or wrong based on what value I've selected or whether I selected my end date first with no start date. All sorts of wonky things can happen, and you've got to figure out how you want to handle that in your application. But to get to my total time off hours, I need to go through an intermediate period, and I need to figure out what the total time off in days is going to be. And so what I'm going to have to do is set up some sort of value for this control on my time off days. So again, let's go. Oh, I don't think I can copy and paste this. It may be easier just to use this form for this part so that we can just talk about it. So I've got my time off days here. Now, this is obviously way too big. This doesn't need to be any more than 4 characters tall. So what I want to happen when my form runs, and as you can see in this case, I'm not using the embedded sections, I'm using regular sections on this form. So in this particular case, oh, it's also showing me everything. So this one is not entirely done. So I'd have to go back and hide these. We'll worry about that later. But what I've done is I've just forced people into a pattern here by saying, okay, well, this is visible. So I'm going to say that I'm going to start my leave in June, on June 2nd. And now my end date is visible. And so fine, then I can say we'll go to June 5th as my leave. And as you can see, I've got a problem here. It's -8 and -1. That's because I thought I picked June 2nd. I actually picked June 9th as my day. Well, that's clearly wrong. I want to pick June 2nd as my day. And because I don't have this as an event field, these values don't change. I'm actually going to have to go back in here and choose it again, my end date. This is the only one that invokes an event. But when I do, it shows me that I'm taking 4 days off and 32 hours. So how is this bit happening? Well, we have to do a little bit of date math to make this magic happen. So if we go back to our form and we go to our set form data, I'm going to have to do a little bit of a calculation. And so this is where date diff comes in. So, oops, I didn't copy that. So date diff is a fantastically useful system variable because it allows, and you use it, well, you can use it a lot in many different scenarios. Anytime you have 2 fields with dates and you want to compare the difference in those dates. And so the syntax for it, I think we can close that. And I don't know why it keeps doing that with those error messages. Sorry about that. So let's go to File, New Text File. And let's paste that in there. So this is the date diff command. It requires two inputs. Well, it requires three inputs and potentially four. I need a date, which is my start date. So this is the first date that I'm going to evaluate. And then I need a second date. Usually in this case, it's the end date. And what I want to do is I want to calculate the difference between date one, my start date, and date two, my end date. Pretty straightforward. For the type, I got a number of choices, one of which is just days. And that's fine, but that will just be calendar days. I'm using business days because in most cases, you're not going to count weekends for PTO, and you're not going to count holidays for PTO. Process Director always knows when the weekend is. If you put your business holidays in Process Director, which you should, it will also know what your holidays are for each year, and those won't count either. And so I want to be able to have a correct calculation of the number of business days that I'm taking off. So I can pull this as business days. And then I need to use include end date equals true. By default, if you don't add include end date equals true, then the last date that you choose, or date two, which in this case is the end date. So I chose, the 2nd through the 6th. So 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 2nd through the 5th. What did I choose? I forgot what I chose. Where is it? Where's my form? Okay, the 2nd through the 5th. That's what I chose as my days off. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. Include end date will include 5th, that one right there, as a date. If I don't use include end date equals true, the default for include end date is false. And so it will not include the 5th and would only return 3 days as the number of days of leave. So I'm going to use include end date equals true to ensure that it counts the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th as my vacation days, and it should return 4 days, which as we saw it does. So the next question then becomes, well, if I can do that to include business days, why can't I just use business hours? And that is where it gets tricky. Now, what I've done in this form is I've created this total time off days equals 4. Now, this form field, I now remember why I just left it at 20 long, because it's a disabled field and I'm showing disabled fields as text. So the value just shows up as text as a 4 on my form. And then I have this calculation field over here where the total time off hours is showing up as 32. Again, it's disabled on my form, but the calculation control enables me to take time off days times 8, because we're going to assume that it's 8 hours per day. And so time off days times 8, 4 times 8 equals 32. And that's fine. So the question then becomes, why am I going through this extra step with this calculation control? Couldn't I just use the total time off days and just call it total time off hours and just do the hours calculation via the date diff system variable? Well, technically, yeah. I mean, there is a type called, oh, well, didn't want to get rid of all of that. There is a type called business hours. The trouble with business hours is that for most organizations, the business hours are probably going to run from somewhere like 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And we're going to get a 10-hour day out of business hours, even though people only work 8 hours a day. Now, it may be at your particular office, you're open from 9 to 5, but you might be open from 8:30 to 5:30, which is a 9-hour day, but you're going to expect everybody to take, an hour lunch. So it's a 9 hour work day, but one of that is a lunch hour. But we don't calculate lunch hours and we don't know who takes lunch hours. We just know that business hours every day is going to be 9 hours a day. It's not going to be 8 hours a day. And if you're like a retail organization, maybe you're open from, you know, 9 in the morning to 9 at night. Your business hours are 12-hour days. So there's no real easy way of running business hours right unless your business hours are literally 8 hours a day only, which by the way, you can set it up that way in Process Director. It just won't be perfectly accurate with the number of business hours that you're actually running. So in general, business days will work and you can figure out how many business days there are. And that's easy because we know what your weekends are and we know what your holidays are. But just giving business days just only gives me the days, and thus it imposes on me the necessity, of having a calculation control to multiply the total time off in days by 4 and to end up with 32 hours. So those are just some useful ways that you can use to calculate days. Now on this form, I thought I had set up all of these sections properly. Um, so my request type is set up to, um, oh, I have a drop-down object called request types. And on this one, I did something a little different. So this is the completed application. These are my request types. Paid time off is 1, unpaid leave of absence is 2, complaint is 3, review dispute is 4. I want to keep that open because what we're going to do is I'm going to, I've been creating stuff from scratch and I may come back and create some other stuff from scratch. I probably will when we start talking about journal controls. But for now, let me switch over to, see what that's my drop down. So fine. So let me switch over to my completed sample application, which kind of does the same thing I've been building, and we'll take a look at that. So on my form, obviously I need to have those mutually exclusive conditions. So I've got time off, complaint, and review. So time off is 1 on my drop down, on this particular drop down. So I have to go back over here. Oh, okay. Well, it's there. I just don't have my condition there. I don't have my condition on. Huh, that's weird. Conditions are missing. Um, Not sure what happened there, but we are going to say that request type, which in this form is called rec type. So when our request type equals 1, and that will be my condition for time off days. This field is never enabled, so I don't know why that is set. That should just be field is disabled. So we've got that as request type 1. This is my complaint section. So we'll go with our field properties there. And this field is visible when we'll click otherwise hidden. And again, this is complaint. So complaint is type 3. So our condition will be when our rec type, so that's our request type, equals 3. And by the way, for our request type, since I gave it a different name, and we're already talking about request type, we are going to give it the friendly name of request type, just to make our life a little bit easier. So complaint info is great. I've got my field properties, rec type 3, otherwise hidden. And for review, and the review complaint or review dispute is type 4. So for this section, we will set the field properties to field is visible when otherwise hidden, and our request type is 4. Okay, so now I should be able to run this and we can kind of see the same thing that we saw earlier, even though we only had one embedded section on the other form. Now we have a section that has 4 possible states when I fill it out. So if it is paid time off, I should see the paid time off section. My start date is disabled. I got to fix that. If it is an unpaid leave of absence, there's nothing to show. If it is a complaint, I get some complaint info. And if it is a review dispute, I get review info. Now, once again, notice something. My sections are embedded. So even though I'm using regular sections instead of embedded sections, this section here, this review info section, is embedded inside the submission section. So embedding sections works just fine. So the only thing that I have that is wrong here is that start date. Start date is an event field. It should be displayed all the time. And I'm not sure why start date wasn't displayed or end date wasn't displayed. Let's look at my field properties here. Field is disabled. Well, that is the problem right there. The entire section was disabled. And so therefore my start date and my end date wasn't showing up, which by the way is a great illustration of what happens whenever you disable a section. It disables everything in the section. Now I just want to be sure that all of my other sections are not set to disabled, just to be sure that all of my form fields work. No, they are not, but I now have the appropriate setup for my different sections, even though I'm using regular sections instead of embedded sections. Everything is set up to work the way that I need it to work, just to show my end users exactly what I need to see. And if my end users are doing date calculations, we're seeing the appropriate date calculations for those end users. If you're going to have any sort of discussion, well, here's another best practice. Get rid of these extra lines. These extra lines are a huge pain, and they do mess up your form spacing horizontally. And I know it can be a bit of a pain to get rid of them. And sometimes you just have to go to source to get rid of them. So this is right above discussion section. So we're just going to go to source and we're going to go to Control F so that we can type in discussion. So there's discussion section. There is that horrible, horrible empty paragraph mark. So that paragraph mark with the non-breaking space, that's what this HTML is. This is a paragraph that just has a non-breaking space in it. It takes up vertical room on your form. And with the way that our CSS styles work, now I know some of you have custom CSS styles, maybe it doesn't apply to you, but for default process director installation, there's a lot of space between paragraphs. And so just adding those blank paragraph lines in makes the problem even worse. So we want to get rid of those blank paragraphs. So it's just that P ampersand NBSP semicolon and then the /P tag to end the paragraph. You want to get rid of those because you want everything tucked up, all nice and tidy in your form design with the control on top of it. And so as you can see, as you look in this, I don't have any of these blank spaces. What I have are the natural spaces between the controls, but that's all I have because I want to save as much horizontal space as possible. In fact, if you look down here at this particular setup on this form, you'll notice I don't have any spaces between this bottom section and the button area controls or between the button area controls and the routing slip. Everything is all jammed up as close as it can get vertically, because that's just going to make my form work a little better. I do have an extra line here where I have my running activity and my instructions inside this section here, but there's no blank line between them. So just keep that in mind when you're building forms to be very careful about your horizontal spacing so that your form just doesn't have these long horizontal blank areas. I do see a lot of forms where people have put in some extra spaces. You want to try to get rid of those extra spaces. So as you can look and see on these particular forms, you can see that I don't have any blank paragraphs. Even at the very bottom of my sections, everything is all packed in nice and tight and tidy, other than that extra space that I just removed a second ago. And so always keep that in mind on your forms. Okay. We are going to, it's 11:50. We don't have a choice. We're going to stop it here. I think I'm mainly done with forms. We now need to talk about the timeline and some of the best practices on how to configure the timeline and also how to make a multi-type request like this work with a process timeline. So we're going to talk about timelines next week, although as part of the timeline, we are going to get into sort of a brief recapitulation. I know just a couple of weeks ago I did milestones and journal controls, but we're going to do a brief recapitulation of the milestones and journals and making the form editable. And next week, we'll really get into the process. We'll talk about the approver comments, how they relate to the process, where they're stored, how you get those back, and then we'll take a look at the process itself and how things are set up on there. I'm probably not going to build a lot of stuff from scratch next week. We'll probably just look at the process, and then week after that, we'll probably look at the process and the email template. But for now, we got to stop and we have to go on about our other lawful occasions. Have a great week. We'll talk to you again next week as we continue on. Until then, so long.